Hello and welcome to our program once again here on Trinity TV in our series ongoing Living Nonviolence. In this program, this episode, we want to look at it from the perspective of nonviolence in the family. Our guest for this program, Alan Julian, he's the leader of the Shogunas RC Men's Ministry. He's a business entrepreneur, and among his other accolades, he's a husband and a father of two. And Aliyah Williams, she's Public Relations Officer of the organization I ACT, and that is I Am Christian Theatre. I ACT is a branch of the Keys Foundation, which uses dramatic presentation to convey social issues. And of course, with us on a normal basis, Brother Kyle Dardaine. He's co-founder and moderator of the Companions of the Transfigured Christ. He's a committee member of the Nonviolence Begins With Me movement. We expect that you will stay with us for the next hour. We'll ask you to join the discussion at the appropriate time. Thanks for being with us this evening. Let me start by asking you, Alan, to talk with us a little bit about, so you run this men's ministry at the Shogunas RC. Yeah. Does this question of nonviolence come up in any of your discussions in those sessions?
Yes, actually it's a Catholic men's group, right? And we were involved, I think, when they launched the nonviolence movement here at Living Waters. And obviously that would have sparked discussions in the group when we went back to the group. It is a real issue with men in their families. It is a real issue in their workplaces. And it's a real issue in their society. Because, I mean, I'm going to say many, but everybody has been affected by violence in one way or the other. So it's not an uncommon topic. Of course, we delve into it multifaceted, but key to it is on a spiritual basis in terms of origin, where this has started, why, etc., why men have been at the forefront, really, of promoting violence, etc. So it is a ongoing discussion.
Yeah, what comes out from some of those discussions, as you see, from the origins? What are the discussion points about where it came from and how is it that men are, in the main, and that's a fact, the perpetrators of violence?
Right. So if you have a peace tree and you find that the bajaks are eating the leaves and the flowers all the time, spraying the bajaks that come on the tree really wouldn't solve the problem. You have to trace back and go straight back. And that's what, being sons of the church, we've done. We've traced them back to the nest to find the genesis of the problem. And that actually is the problem, right? That genesis, right? Where Adam basically abdicated his responsibility as a man in terms of defending his wife, his home, in terms of being the prophet in his house who would speak the word of God and hear God and speak it, and being the priest, the man who would sacrifice his own life for his bride and his family, etc. Those three tenets really have stained man, if you want to say that, till today. And it has brought something like an institutional amnesia in terms of, and institutions in terms of the family, the church, society, where we've forgotten what it is to truly be a man. And this has gone on from generations to generations to generations. So our work is really to bring that understanding back from the origin of Genesis, before the fall, as we say, of what manhood is. Yeah. And that's an ongoing process.
All right, I want to come back to you on it about how, to the extent that, Christian men, you talk about Catholic men, have to be counseled about violence. But let me bring you into the discussion, Ms. Williams, and ask you a similar question. How do you work with this theme about nonviolence in the work you do in the in the Christian theater?
Okay, so the group that I am in, IAT, falls under the broad organization of the Keys Foundation. So the Keys Foundation, we are a non-profit organization, and we use theatrical expressions to convey social messages. So you'd find that some of the work that we do would be based on what is happening currently in society. So in 2016, I believe, there was the death of Shannon Banfield, and later on a schoolgirl, Rachel Ramkisoon. So in our group chat in discussion, like a lot of, because we work with youth, so a lot of us, we were appalled at what was happening. Some persons knew Shannon personally, so it really hit home for them. So we decided, well, our founder, Darren Sandy, he does spoken word. So what we do is every year we put on a production, and we use that as our fundraiser to continue the community work. So he decided that year he would do something based on gender-based violence. So we put on 2 shows. One was called Drift and was Eve. And Drift looked at domestic violence from the male's point of view, because we usually tend to think that, you know, the women are being affected and men are usually ashamed to speak about it. So we took it from the aspects of what does it mean to be a man, because many men think that, you know, being a man means sometimes hitting your wife or just basically by the amount of women you had. So we thought that we need to reach them on an individual level and try to dispel the myths that society had on what it meant to be a man. And the show we did, Eve, it was an interesting concept because it was a husband, he was abusive. But it was one wife, but we used 5 different girls to play this character. And they each represented different aspects of the woman. So her sexuality, her academic pursuits, her religious being. So you're showing that at different points, like he's thinking he's interacting with one woman, but you see like at different points, different women would be having conversations with him and whatnot. So that's some of the work that we do. We also, well, as the theme says, with the reaching persons on an individual level, what we do is sometimes we may have events such as the I Still Care, where we went into Port of Spain and we would hand out like chocolates on the streets to persons, give them hugs, give them bookmarks, encouraging words, just to let them know that we care about you and whatnot. So it's really reaching people on like an individual level, letting them know that they have worth and value, because usually you'll find with domestic violence, persons who tend to stay in a situation, they lose, like, they basically don't think they have any value anymore and they need to be in a situation. So when we reach them on an individual level, they get to encourage them to find value in themselves, to do things, to join groups, join some sort of activist group, come and join us here at sport, because we also meet with some young boys from Maloney, because the organization is based in Maloney. So we meet with them on a Friday evening, right before their football practice. Well, we are Seventh-day Adventists. So we'll meet with them before Sabbath, and we would talk with them. We do Bible stories on their level, because it's between ages of about 8 to 15. So we do that with them and encourage them to stick with the sports and do productive things. So that's how we deal with the issue of violence, like reaching everyone on a personal level and showing them worth and value.
Let me just ask you, how challenging is it doing that kind of work in a community like such as Maloney?
It's a bit challenging because persons don't really see this as a important topic. They don't see, they don't really see how bad it is. Like, even when we do shows sometimes, we do it on a Saturday and a Sunday night. And the Saturday night when we did the show Eve, there's a scene where the husband was beating his wife. And persons in the crowd, like, they were laughing, like it was funny for them. Yes, it was serious, but they were laughing. And then on the Sunday night, you'd find that some persons were a bit more serious. They just really getting to see the way that society might view topics like this. Like, they really don't think that is that important. In Maloney, we started an initiative called the Little Fire, and we have 4 stages. So it's fire in my heart, fire in my house, in my school, in my community, and it's with primary school children. So when we started, it was very difficult to get the parents to send them out, because sometimes we may sit down and have these great initiatives in the dream, but when you go out to execute it, you realize like parents really want to send their children, or when you teach them something in school, when they go home, they see the total opposite. Yeah, so it was a bit difficult. So we really had to, sometimes you would sit down and you would think of this great idea, but then you have to go all over and scrap it and say, okay, this is not making any sense. So what we did is that we wanted parents to come to some of the meetings and interact with children, but we had to go to them. So that's some of the things we have to do, kind of alterate our initiatives to suit the community.
Yeah, and I guess in some cases parents don't want to send their children to sessions like these because of the very fear of the sense of violence in the community. So that's an added challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kyle, let me ask you let's sort of outline the sub-theme for this edition of the program. It deals with the question of See, Judge, Act. Outline what that is and how we are to put that into practice in terms of addressing violence among us and violence in the family.
Well, I think, Andy, beginning with what Alan was just referring to there, the truth is that at the core of helping people to be able to make a shift in behavior and to make new choices in their family life in terms of nonviolence, the truth is we have to do good examination of the causes, the root causes, the things that are at the very heart of what pushes the violence even in each person, yeah? But then also in the family system. And then you brought up the type of community that they are in. So all of these factors are factors affecting families. And it's easy to say, to give a carte blanche judgment and say, you know, this family needs to change the violence or whatever. But sometimes we have to look at all these situations. That's the C element. This See, Judge, Act is a context from as long ago, from as far back that the church has used as a way of, and it's a biblical way too, of approaching, responding to an issue. And in the C, we have to see what is at the real core of the problem, which is what Alan was pointing
root causes.
to. What are the root causes? How do men and women experience their own selves in the light of the family and the gender roles and the issues that are, the images that are put upon them by the society about a man, if you are a man, you don't do this, or you're a man, you don't cry, or
images
you don't
and rules.
emote, or you don't, and she can't, your wife she can't tell you what to do, and
know her place.
Know her place, and
If you're a
sometimes
man, you don't take that from a woman.
Right.
From
yes,
outside.
yes. So sometimes a lot of the social images and the broken images that we have inside us, we're living them out and not even realizing. Sometimes we're bringing a generation or two generations or three generations of pain forward in the way we are conducting ourselves in the family. So we have to see that, and then in terms of the judge, we have to judge what is true, what is right,
Good.
what is good, and what is wholesome. And in judging that, that means being able to speak truth to the things that are not good and not wholesome, and to be able to, I guess, to judge what are the places that each person needs to work on in their own journey in order to change what's going on in the family. The truth is, nonviolence begins with me. Speaks to the fact that every person in the family has a role to
and
play.
is responsible. Yep.
Correct. And yes, so it's not the who to blame. The judging is more, I like that word. Judging is not who's to blame, but it is judging who is to be responsible for the new culture in the family.
What's my responsibility to bring to the table to try
In
and
the context of the
do
family.
this? Yeah. And acting is about taking a decision to.
Correct. And acting is about choosing to use what we have judged as good and wholesome and right, and to do the hard work to put it into practice in my life. And it's a journey. We've been saying that on this show right through. Nonviolence begins with me is hard work. Acting it out is even harder, right? But it is something that we have to challenge ourselves to, you know. What is good, what is wholesome, what is right, what is good for the well-being of all. And that is the definition, actually, of nonviolence, you know. It is a creative power that is used to bring about the well-being of all persons. So think of that in the family. If each person were to try to find, let's say, creative ways to get through an argument or a difference of opinion, or, you know, or a difficult financial period in the family, to find creative ways without putting down others, destroying
the
others.
harmony.
Yes,
Leah, let me come back to you. But just before I ask you to comment on this, let me just remind our viewers and listeners and followers of the program to engage with us at any point that you wish to do so. On Facebook, if you're on Facebook, and you can follow us, and then, like I say, in a couple of minutes we will open the phone lines and you could join us on the phone for this discussion. Yeah, the question about just that, seeing and judging and acting, but how we inculcate that in a family setting?
Oh, big question.
Yeah. Now, how important is it for us to be talking about this, from a family setting? Non-violence begins with me. It begins with my family.
Okay. Well, the family setting is very important because that's where a child learns everything at first. Not in school or going with a friend. Like every value that a child learns begins at home. So usually we might think, when it comes to stuff like domestic violence and everything, we need to talk to the adults, we need to talk to the grown women and the grown men, but you need to speak to the children as well because they understand these things. They're old enough to know right from wrong. And I think that's something that we do, like we overlook the children because we think this is a big people issue. Yeah. So we'd always deal with the adults, but we don't find ways to tailor the information to suit children. So I think that's something that we really need to work on in terms of how we address the family. I think I'll come back to you with that one, more information.
Could I add something?
Go ahead.
And then maybe if Alan has something fit, I think, yes, so that's a very good thing in terms of the work with children. And so I also think we have to do skills-based work. We have to empower people how to be more nonviolent. We have to, in brass tacks, real language,
concrete.
help them to find concrete ways. And for instance, sometimes, people don't know that the way that they're communicating is aggressive or it's violent. That the words you use, and they might think violence is, I don't stab anybody. I don't beat up
kill
anybody. So what about that? I don't beat my wife. But there's domestic violence and emotional abuse and verbal abuse. And so giving people the skills now, how not to be passive or how not to live aggressive, but teaching them like what we call assertiveness training, how to be assertive in your communication, in your family, how to express what you desire without putting down the life of another,
or a different opinion.
Correct.
That's an important distinction to make, Alan, about being non-violent doesn't only mean not hitting or not using physical violence. And how people can be violent without recognizing, sometimes by your attitude, you're communicating violence. And how do we reorient ourselves within families to treat that?
Well, I think actually the first, and that's what the non-violence begins with me. The easiest, whether it's violence or any flaw in character or behavior, the easiest thing for us to do is always point outward, right? It's always easy. He does this. Look at him, he does that. Even within the context of the family, you're doing this to upset me, etc. The importance of the C is really introspection, right? To see that behavior and recognize it, which comes to the point you're making, Andy, to recognize that it is not only in physical violence, but sometimes the emotional violence does similar and sometimes even more damage than, I'm around a little while, and I know some wives and so on, and this is the one that might be controversial, even husbands who are emotionally damaged based by wives. As a matter of fact, very recently, a friend was telling me that his brother's wife tells the husband, hey, remember this house we living in? That's my parents' son, so any day, they might for years, but constantly remind him, any day, you could pack up, because this is my house. He went into a venture to do something new and creative. What you know about that? You can't do them things. So constantly putting down. You have no skill sets. You don't know about this. This is my house. That damages intensely a man from ego to esteem to his sense of being a man. So, and that's emotional, that's not physical. So, emotional violence destroys human, and it goes both ways, obviously. Men also, some that don't hit also, you want to put down the wife, you can't do the simple things, actually, and that comes from the men's group. That came from the men's group, where one was saying, boy, you know, it's only after joining the men's group and really encountering men sharing that I realized what I used to be doing my wife. Every time she cooked Kalloo, me really want that, you know, my mother is the one that, me want that, right? You can't do that like mommy. And it had reached a point where the wife was distraught, right? And it came out that you keep putting down my, and he didn't even realize what he was doing. And that's simple, and it may seem simple. Unconsciously, but what it was doing to her was her esteem was gone, eroded. Yeah. Simple thing as cooking, right? Simple thing. So that's why Kyle is saying we have to properly train and help families, individuals, identify the ways they purport and portray violence.
Contribute. Okay.
And contribute, not only physically, but emotionally.
And sometimes what is called in some families, let me put that to you, Aliyah, the question of what some people call the silent treatment. Mm-hmm. That is a form of emotional violence.
Yes.
I never really experienced it in my home.
Yeah, but I mean,
really.
It's something that you say you never experienced in your group.
It's not something I really spoke about, but something to think about, actually.
Yeah. But it's not something that you're not familiar hearing about.
Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
She's not married yet. She's not married yet. That's why. She's not married yet. That's why.
But it does. You know, it's only when we started doing the content, and okay, we all wanted to do something about the violence, and we, you know, Rhonda and us spoke, and a few of us and different leaders from different organizations, we said we're going to come together, and we had a first meeting, and we said we're going to do this, and we were all gung-ho on it, you know. I mean, you know, all built up for this thing, and then when the material started to come down, and we started to hear
blown away
the conversation, and I remember that one in particular when I think it was Sister Julie Peters who talked about. She said, "And what about you, women? When you know you go into silent mode and you lock down everything in the house through your silence, do you know that is violence that you're doing to the other?" And people were like, "What?" You know, real women went, "What?" You know, because they're thinking that their silence is their space or whatever. But sometimes it's the way we wield in that silence, it is like, sometimes it's worse than saying something,
Of course.
Yeah.
Just now, as you mentioned, the silent treatment, like I didn't really have an answer to that because I didn't experience it. And it was also showing me that sometimes things that we might consider to be violent, somebody else might not. So what I think the root of all of this is always reminding persons and individuals of their value and their worth, because when you value yourself and you value somebody else, then you wouldn't be doing certain things to them. So you wouldn't have to sit down and, okay, I wonder if this is violence, not this word might be violence or whatnot. You would have an understanding of how to relate to each other, and you would know what you should and should not do, and the lines wouldn't be as blurred as it is. So I just think that.
I also want to say, there must be constant re-evaluating too, right? Re-evaluation has to be. So you may stop, let's just use this in, you may stop the silent treatment using that, but then they may have other substitutes that you use to, you know? So it's a constant re-evaluating how you communicate and sometimes how you get your will. Right? How you get your will in situations and in communicating and so on in the family.
Go ahead.
I like this thing of that you are bringing up about pointing us back constantly to the value, the worth of the person, the dignity of the human person, and I'm very glad that you're raising that, because at the heart of any desire to try to be nonviolent, there has, just as we're talking about the roots of violence, for there to be a good foundation or a root, desire to be nonviolent, one has to come to that place where you have encountered yourself as a person with a human being with dignity, with human dignity, and that you
See
are
others
that every other person has that equal dignity. At there, if you could start there, it starts to help you retrace your footsteps. Did I, as you say, did what I say there just now, did it affirm this person's dignity, or did it demean them? Did I scrape away a little bit of their, you know? Yeah.
And how do we help each other, you know, whether individually, but we're talking about within families, yeah, to recognize these things? What are some of the conversations you have?
Right.
Yeah.
So I will use my family as example. Speaking to that, the same dignity story, a lot of the homeless persons that we see around the shops, malls, etc., a lot of them have been victims of violence and are now homeless because of that, right? So generally what we do, they're asking, they're begging, most of them, they're begging. So you take out $1, $5, if you're generous, 20, and you just give and you continue on. I heard someone speak once about the hardest thing with these people is that their dignity is gone. We treat them subhuman, right? So I started with my children. I have a daughter of 16, a son of 11. When we would go to the mall or anywhere and we encounter a homeless person, I would tell them, let's not just give them money. Let's have an encounter with them. So I would ask, what's your name? How come you're in this situation? You have any family members? Sometimes they're with little children. Ask for introductions, introduce them to my children, and so on. And that goes far beyond $5, $10, $20, even $100. Because you can recognize almost instantly that the person feels human again. I call them by name, right? So sometimes you even develop a little relationship. So I might see them again and, Esther, how you doing? Tell me what happened. The children. And one person was saying, you know, people don't even ask my name. It was a guy outside of Rituals, had a walk and we were speaking to him. And he said, you know, you all were the first persons he could think of in maybe 2 to 3 years that asked him his name. You understand? That asked his name. And the man ended up in tears, right? Because you're saying, nobody asked his name. Nobody, they just, he said, people actually give me money and don't even look at me. Right? They don't even look at him. So I started that, just as an example, and that's given an example in the family, and that's just for homeless and so on, right? To try to bring back some dignity, because that's what, and I think Kalloo said it, that's what violence does, right? It really depletes your dignity. And we are all made in the image and likeness of God, and we all really supposed to have the same dignity as human beings, as brothers and sisters. So, and as an example, in the home, that's just one of them that I try to encourage and would hope that my children would continue that, you know, in terms of bringing, yes, in terms of
some things from what Alan was saying seem to resonate with you earlier.
Yeah, well, for me, I have a sister, so being like 2 young adults and my mommy, so it's a bit challenging because sometimes, like, you know, sisters, well, siblings, they always fight and whatnot, and mommy's always saying, so was you talking to each other, to say sister, whatever. But we kind of disregard everything she was saying. But as you're older now, she would say things and you'd realize it makes sense. She said, is this, okay, when you have your own home, how are you going to be conducting yourself as a mother, as a wife? She's like, you have, let's say you have a little boyfriend now. So you have a boyfriend now. If it is he walks in and sees the way you're conducting yourself now, how do you think you're going to react to it? And then I really started to look at it from the perspective of me owning my own home and actually being a parent. Because, you know, as a teenager, you might think, your parents just nagging you, whatever, but when you think of it from the point of, okay, just now I might be a mother and a wife, how am I going to be conducting myself? So that was that. In terms of bringing each other up and encouraging each other, we try to have something like family sessions where we sit down and talk about things, good things, bad things. If you find you didn't like the way mommy spoke to you last week or your sister spoke to you, because in the heat of the moment we would say things and we would never really address it after, even if you didn't mean it. So actually having like family sessions, they get to sit down and it's a nice forum for children to talk to their parents, parents to talk to their children, because most times, well, some children are just plain rude, right? But then most times when a child speaks to their parents and says, yeah, like I don't really like how you said this, I felt a certain way about it. You know, the parents might retaliate, but like in a family setting when everybody is calm and relaxed, then you might be able to explain, okay, this is why I said this, so this is how I think we should move forward. So I think always letting some time pass and then coming back to the situation and sitting down in a cool, relaxed environment will make things easier for you to get to relate to each other and have open conversations.
Yeah, how important do you think the process is such that, you know, with that kind of unlearning of what Alan calls learned behavior, so that you don't have to have a session where so you go over what you did that you shouldn't do in the first place, so you know what to avoid, and how important that is, you think, in family settings.
It is very important, yeah, because you learn the art of apologizing, or being open with how you're feeling and realizing that anger is not just the only emotion you can have. You learn about different ways to deal with situations, because that's what happens with domestic violence. Usually anger, they're allowed to take over for every situation, and that encourages the violence. So you get to speak about things and you realize, okay, take some time, breathe, and then deal with the situation. I think it's very important. In terms of our culture as a Caribbean, it might be difficult at first because they would always think of these things as like American people say or white people say, to sit down and like actually have a family meeting. That's the sad reality of it. So it's something that we really need to like look into and change our mindset towards it.
So. You know, it's very profound what you just said there. When you said that, I was thinking about, you know, it's ironic. The program it was an American TV show. The Huxtables, right? Bill Cosby. And you know, a lot of people in the black community in the United States thought that program was too good to be true. They said that it did not resemble
the true family.
The family life of an average black American family.
The average thing is like you can't talk to the father. The father is the authoritarian.
He's absent.
The mother is the one who gives the leeway, and then like siblings are supposed to fight, and that's what people think is the norm. And the whole idea is changing. There's a group called Freetown Collective, I don't know if you know about them, and their thing is normal, not normal. So what we think is normal, what we think is right, is actually far from the standard that we should be living by. So yeah.
When she raised the issue, Kyle, about the art of apologizing.
So, you know, sometimes you have preset conversations, meaning before we go live, you know, sometimes we are all talking before we go live, and Alan and I looked at each other because before we started live with you at home, the audience, of course we were already bubbling about this conversation about nonviolence in family. And Alan and I were talking about that. What you are referring to earlier is what she's bringing up, and as a young person, I am so blessed and encouraged to hear these things that she's sharing, because those are not easy things to do, to see yourself in a family sitting down. Sometimes we let our pride get so high that we cannot come now to the table of conversation. But if we could start in the family, you could imagine Andy as a person dealing with national forums and so. The shift we could make in culture if families could learn to sit down and to do what we call in developmental work, talk it out, talk it through, you know, rather than act it out, rather than acting out your feelings or acting on some kind of impulsive feeling. That you could, I like what she said, there's a skill there. You could teach people in the family, stop, she said that, take time, you know, we don't need to punch it out right away. Take time, step back. And I like this idea of the family, as she said, coming together and kind of learning the art. It is an art. Nonviolence begins with me is an art, to be able to sit and say, I don't like how you might have spoken. But even before you're telling the other person, even the difficult work of saying, I realized that how I spoke to you yesterday, owning my stuff first, you know what I mean? I realized, or, you know, when I made that action, I did it for this reason. I thought I was operating, but I didn't consider your feelings or how you would have received it. Talking through those kinds of things as a family, that is, if we could get I want to say honestly, if we could get the Caribbean man and woman to start that little art form of sitting in a family and talking about the week gone by, or talking about the last month gone by, or whatever you could make time for, that is a beautiful art that could change things in the society where violence and non-violence is concerned.
Yeah, and while we're talking here, we are putting these things out as suggestions for people in the viewing audience to pay attention to. Yes. And these are pointers. And people, you know, we're asking people to take them to heart and consider them, you know, in settings in your family. You said, Kyle, and you know, we're talking about if we could make time. Making time ought to be a priority for family discussions. Treating with these things, right?
Well, the reason Kyle would have been smiling, Kyle and I had a...
Just before you continue, let me just say that I think we could put the numbers up on the screen. Okay, I'm not sure if they are up yet, but when you see the numbers, give us a call, and we're talking about non-violence begins with me, it begins in my family.
Yeah. Yes, so there's a practice that I started in my family. So we're talking practical, real things now, right? Once a week, usually to the end of the week, we gather, we gather generally for blessing every night. But once a week, when we gather before blessing, I start a process, being head of the home, being the man, the one who normally full of pride and so on. And I start off by addressing my wife, everybody's gathered, and asking for forgiveness for anything that I would have wronged her with in the week gone by, right? Genuine, not just words.
Well, I thought that's the word that came to my mind. Yeah. Just do it as a form or...
No, genuinely. Sometimes I can identify some things, you know what I mean? Now I'm with the children there. Sometimes I wouldn't identify it and we would speak after. But publicly, I'm saying in the family setting, I'm saying, and I try to use certain words. I ask them, I don't say I apologize. I say I really asking your forgiveness, right? I'm asking your forgiveness for the times, sometimes I identify some stuff, as I said, other times I leave it general. And so I do that with her, and her response, usually, quickly enough, usually is, you know, I forgive you. The languaging is also important, right? So I then go to my daughter, who is the next eldest, and I do the same with her. And then to my son, who is the 11-year-old. And then it's my wife's turn to do the same, go through, right? That has been a tremendous healing catalyst in the family for many different reasons. One, the children recognize that daddy starts this process. That daddy is asking forgiveness of mommy, then us, who are the children, you normally know your place, and so daddy's asking us for forgiveness. And the forgiveness then lies with us to give him. So we go through that process. Sometimes it's a lot of fun, meaning yes, I remember when you're very impatient, daddy, and things. So sometimes it's a little tougher, right? Sometimes it's a little tougher depending on what happened during the week.
Depending on the issue.
Correct, right? But happens generally every week. And they learn the importance of asking for forgiveness, and the response to it is not, it doesn't matter, it's okay. It's never okay, and that's the language. No, you can't respond and say, I'm sorry, it's okay. It's not okay. I forgive you, right? I forgive you. And I've encouraged us to the men's group and so on, and sometimes it's more difficult, but I'll tell you, it has been tremendous in a healing catalyst in the family. And I would like to encourage all looking, especially men in their homes, to start that process. As the man of the house, as the spiritual head, to start that process. And you begin it.
Talk with us a little bit about what you recognize as the challenges of some of the men in the group as to about embracing this, because we're putting this out there as a model for some of those people who are looking, whether they're the children in the home or whether they're the parents in the home.
Yeah.
This is a model of how to go about establishing this culture, this environment of nonviolence in the family. But
the key fear is rejection.
Yeah.
So the key fear is, honey, I'm sorry for all the things. You're sorry? Well, then you should not do it. And it isn't embraced as, I forgive you. That is the key. You understand? That
how you encourage
well
to go beyond that, and to rise above that.
You have to do like Nike. Just do it. That's it. You just have to do it. You just have to do it. And
That's true.
I mean, sometimes it takes longer than others, but when that process and a spouse and children start to realize that it's genuine and behavior is changing. So I can't say sorry every week for the last 20 years for the same thing every week. Then, hey, you ain't serious, right? So they must know, I mean, we're a roller coaster life, right? So there are falls and so, but they must recognize that you are in a process of really trying to perfect the flaws in yourself. And that's why you're asking forgiveness, because you're also recognizing the impact it has on the family. So, I mean, many families have a lot of hurts, and that's what some of the men with is a lot of hurts, boy, to do that, boy. You understand? That's what they take a big stick now behind me, which is the other end of violence, the response from the spouse and even the children. Either not the silent treatment in it, or responding in like mine in terms of putting down and so on.
I want to add something here, Andy, because I just thought in terms of what Alan was saying, I think sometimes people feel that to forgive means that the person was right. Or that if you accept and receive that person's word of forgiveness, that it means, we have this way, I don't want them to feel like they got away with that. That kind of way.
They got that one over me.
Yes. But violence begets violence. Hurting people hurt people. And what we have to come to realize is, and to make a choice is, am I going to be a stake in the continuous cycle of hurting others in my family and they hurting me too? Or does somebody in the family have to take, not blame, but here's the word, responsibility to decide to make a change going forward? And I think I'm bringing that up because sometimes one of the pains people are carrying is there's so much pain in the history, like they hear in our conversation tonight, right? And they say, boy, you don't know how much baggage in the past we got to apologize for. No. I want to suggest that if you're taking up this model, that what you do is you just plant a flag in the sand from today. We can't go back and say, I want, and start to have sessions, kumbaya, for the last 15
years ago, you remember?
You know what I mean? But if we start a simple practice today, and we start to do it each week or each month or whatever, we could change the tide of the river that is going on in our family.
Sorry,
yes, go ahead.
one point. I think something that's important to note is that he said, you might ask the person for forgiveness and they might still be upset or angry about the situation. And that is very normal. That is natural, actually. So don't always think that when somebody does you something and they apologize, like the anger, the feelings going to dissolve right away. It's not. And it's okay to be angry. Just like in, something common in Trinidad, it's okay if your partner is unfaithful. It's okay for you to feel angry and hurt, but the real issue is how do you deal with it? What do you do after the situation? Because some persons, is that the anger becomes so extreme that they get violent. But nothing is wrong with being angry, being upset.
Can I ask you
So that's how you deal with it.
Yes, I think we have a call on the line. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes.
Good night to the panel. I'm listening to you all. Fine. And find the whole talk relates to me in a way. Very interesting. Oh
Yes.
my God, I'm hearing my voice.
Yes, I think the
And a lot of it could relate to me.
Yes.
So I'm going to take some examples from what you all are saying and try and act it out for myself.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask you as well, to what extent you try and because you said a couple of things about how your mother at home tries to deal with issues, how you're seeing that as something that you can then use to talk with the people in your group and so on, because your mother seems to be a kind of model in terms of setting peace and stability and harmony in your household.
How do you deal with it in our group? In our group, it might sound like a jokey thing, but we do something called, we have like a jury session. So if a jury session.
Yes.
So if somebody in the group would have wronged somebody else, as small as it might be, if it is, you feel a certain way about it or you have a grievance, you would come, we would see like certain members from the group to be a part of the jury and we will deal with the situation. And it just kind of shows you like, things need to be worked out. You need to handle it. So the same way mommy would come and say, okay, sit down, let's talk. The same way we would do it in the session. Sit down, let's talk about it. So I think like talking and communication is a very important thing that we tend to overlook sometimes. That's one method we use.
Yeah. You know, in at-risk programs, we try to teach kids who are in at-risk programs, like at homes and so where boys in particular have been displaced also in society, socially displaced, or come from situations, real brokenness, disharmony in the family, abuse, etc. In retooling some of these young men, we try to teach them that in the male environment, we say real men talk things out rather than act it out. And you cannot believe, we have a whole big poster like that up, because you cannot believe the power of that, of giving people that, the validation to feel that, let your voice be heard. Of course, still in a non-violent way, because you can say, let my voice be heard and cross you out. Not necessarily, but, and not at all, but what we are advocating for is, a lot of times that you mentioned anger. Anger is not a bad emotion. It is about how we communicate our feelings, how we demonstrate what we are feeling. And very often, if we are not talking through our feelings, expressing those feelings in the family, what happens is we repress them, we shove them down. And guess what happens with anything repressed? It comes out as an explosion, a volcano almost.
Volcano effect.
So it is to teach even our children and families that it's okay to disagree with your sister, it's okay to not think on who went in who room and take out whatever. These things happen, right? But talk it through, work it out.
And there could be respectful disagreement. Let me just continue to ask those in our viewing audience to call and join the discussion. There could be, and there very often is a lot of times, respectful disagreement.
Absolutely.
But we have to recognize how to disagree, as they say, without being disagreeable.
Correct, and disrespectful, right? Which is sometimes difficult, right? In terms of how culture has taught us to basically impress your view. If you have a view, you impress your view and you make sure that that view is heard, and at any position anybody else may have, you make sure and you impress your view, right? Even from a corporate point of view, I would say, even from a corporate point of view, I have found that listening to a different opinion, as a matter of fact, we were actually speaking about this before the program in terms of, Kyle and I speak about that sometimes. In group dynamics, the family is no different. If everybody is agreeing all the time, it's almost impossible to grow. It's not almost, it's impossible to grow. If everybody is seeing the same point of view, has the same idea, it's impossible to grow. The issue is how you deal with a different opinion. And that's why I think some humility in terms of listening. And first, again, it begins with you, in knowing that you are not always right, you don't have all the answers. And I sometimes try to also place that in the family setting and also even work and business, you know, that you don't have all the answers. Alan, you don't have all, you could have a lot of experience, you still don't have all the answers.
I want to put something on the table because sometimes a lot of us men are socially awkward and sometimes we try to communicate our feelings without speaking and so that somebody else, you know, the wife or sometimes the astute child will recognize that daddy is hurting. He wants to move from there. He wants to apologize, but doesn't know how. And then it requires somebody else to see that and act on it. How do we encourage some of us, not to have people guessing as to, you know, we are penitent, but we don't want to come out and appear that way.
So in a sense, you see it on international scales where you have peacekeepers and people who are peace negotiators. And the reason why they do that is sometimes in the face of tension, two people don't want to back down, right, from their position. But you know, sometimes it is that they would prefer not to be in the war or the fight, but for appearance's sake, you know.
Pride.
But correct, pride, yes. But in the home too, like sometimes if you have, let's say somebody who doesn't have that kind of skill or ability, the man, his pride, he doesn't want to put. A softer agent could come in, a child sometimes. Sometimes even a wife could come in, or the vice versa, a husband and wife, and say, you know, this is where I think what is called, it's diplomacy. You know what I mean? In the international word is diplomacy, you know. But what I remember, I go back to as an example of this, is sometimes when in my growing up as a child, I saw my father as he was a taskmaster, very solid, strong, and very dominant in that sense. And in many ways, in his ways of relating, I experienced, now looking back on it, a lot of violence, you know. Now, when I look back now and I realize that I heard stories only when I hit teenage years, where my mother said, I used to take the conversation into the bedroom to say, ease him up a little bit now. I used to say, so she said, I would say as a wise woman, she knew, rather than get into a debacle in front of the children, she knows her husband is wrong. She knew that in that situation, he pushed the envelope too much or he was too overbearing. And she told, it's only when we got older, she said, there were many conversations you were not privy to. You know, I was able to behind the scenes say, let him go now. Ease up on this consequence or you know, you hurt Kyle there, you should apologize. And I understand too that vice versa. She said sometimes in conversations he was able to say certain things and she saw another way. So sometimes you need an advocate of nonviolence in the sense that a person who is trying for peace in the family to do some negotiating and so.
Sometimes it's a child in the setting. I mean, I've experienced that too, you know. I mean, I blew a fuse and so on, and my daughter would come after, daddy. You know?
I think we have a call on the line. Good evening.
Yes, a pleasant good evening to you all. A very interesting program. I must say, listening to you all, you know, it came across, and in order to win a war, sometimes we have to lose it. And there are things that are appropriate and inappropriate. So some of our behaviors are inappropriate behaviors for certain times. And that is what sometimes bring on that violent response, or what we will call a reaction instead of an interaction. And while listening, I must say, it showed that there is a lot of transference in people's behaviors, in that two adults have something, but one of them cannot take it out of the other one, so now it transfers to the children. So we have to be people who guard against behaviors like that. And I said I will share this with you all. You know, sometimes we get up in the morning and we don't want to be bad, but somehow or the other, St. Paul will say, we could be trying to turn out bad, but there is nothing wrong in saying, I am sorry, and start again, because that is why we have a new day each day, so we have new beginnings, and this is my little sharing tonight.
Thank you very much. It's very profound, very solid.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
She mentioned that sometimes with the war, somebody might win and somebody else would lose. But I think it's not to think of it as a war, rather, but think of it as how could we settle this matter? Because sometimes when it is you think, okay, well, I won the argument, you wouldn't even realize that, okay, even though you won, there were things that you would have done that were wrong. Even though the other person would have lost, have things that you still need to address where you wrong the person. So if it is a situation comes up and we think as a couple, as a family, how are we going to best settle this matter where every party feels like, okay, like the situation has been dealt with and I am satisfied, and that's better than just the win and losing kind of.
Because sometimes we caught up with trying to be right, right? So I am right. But I give an example often that being right really doesn't empower you or sometimes solve the situation. So, okay, you're right, and everybody's still vexed, but you are right? So, for example, you are driving down at 60 miles per hour, you're on a green light, and you see an NP tanker coming across to break a red light. You're right, you're on green, drive through. You know what I mean? You're right, you'll end up dead right. But being right didn't empower you. And it's similar in the family setting that sometimes we try to really, well, I am right, but it doesn't help the relationship, which is the key. That should be the focus, harmony in the relationship.
And sometimes what appears to be weakness is really strength, and some people don't see that.
Don't recognize that, yes.
And we need to encourage some of us. And again, more men, you would say that have that deficit.
It's a pity the time is almost through, but you know something, actually Kyle and I were discussing, it's really hard to bring that up now, but just the whole feminist movement and the impact that has had on society and men in terms of initially it was to bring dignity to all and to women, bring dignity to them, but it has morphed into to push men out and to show women as superior now. And the truth is, we are complementary. And that is the key. We are complementary. So even us as our men's group, what we do is, we always say it when new people come, listen, we're not here to be any superior person. We're here to become better fathers, better husbands, better sons, better brothers.
Yeah, well, let me just say that it is your contention that the women's movement is setting out to be superior. Some people will challenge that. But
of course they would. Of course they would. That's why I say, I mean, the time now wouldn't put, but...
Yeah, there's striving for a balance, and sometimes, you know, you go extreme in order to come back, you know, to get an equilibrium. But let me ask you, Ali, about... You did there. I imagine there are a couple of things that you were taking from this discussion to go and seek to employ in your group, and I act working on this question about nonviolence. Yeah.
Let's see. Within nonviolence, what's something that's coming to my mind is that okay, we would speak to persons and tell them, you know, like, get out of violent situations, try not to be the violent person or whatnot. But we don't really do much follow-up after to see, okay, like, what happens with the person after. And I think that's something that we need to work on. I think that's something that we need to work on. Also, like, a lot of the examples that we use in here kind of circulating around the nuclear family system, the mommy, daddy, siblings, whatnot. But we have a lot of single-parent families as well, women who would have left relationships because of the domestic situation. So we also need to check in on them, like you mentioned, in the men's group a lot, and I think this is where they could also help to fill the gaps with single-parent households. So that's some things that...
Yeah, because families are families with or without both parents.
Correct.
I just want to make sure, I want to put a word out that is running in my head, and it is disarm, disarm, disarm. I think in families, we have to try to disarm ourselves and disarm each other and disarm the environment, you know?
Yeah. What's your last word?
Last word, at the heart of the gospel is mercy, and at the center of mercy is forgiveness.
And we always have to bear that.
We have to bear that.
Forgiveness.
In the hope. That's the beginning.
And there's no weakness in forgiveness.
There's absolutely strength in it.
And in seeking it. Yeah. And then Julian, Aliyah Williams, and Brother Kyle Dardaine, thank you very much. Thanks for watching. I'm Andy Johnson. See you next time.